Judgment time is here for Arizona's selection process for judges, as voters consider changes proposed for the merit selection system.
We're fixing it because a small group of politicians wants to take control of how we select judges in this state, and that's very dangerous.
This is well supported by a lot of those judges. Say, hey, and that's some common sense changes. It's no power grab. I mean, I'm only here for I term limit. You know, we're out of here in 8 years.
Tonight on Arizona Week, Proposition 115 and 3 more constitutional amendment proposals. It's part 2 of our ballot propositions primer.
Production of Arizona Week is made possible in parts by a grant from the Stonewall Foundation and by the members of Arizona Public Media. Thank you for your continued support. Once again, your moderator, Michael Chiha.
Is Proposition 115 a political power grab, or is it an improvement to the process of selecting justices and judges in Arizona's 3 most populous counties? Here are the arguments over the proposition, starting with proponent Andy Tobin, Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives. Arizona's merit selection system is lauded nationally for the quality of judges and justices that it selects. Why do we need to change that?
Well, you know, first off, I know people keep saying it's lauded. I don't hear that around the country. I don't know who the ones are saying that. I'm not a big fan of it. I come from Yavapai County, and we like to elect our judges up there. Some people will say we've done a pretty good job. You've got a Supreme Court justice now down here in Arizona who came from Yavapai County. So I do believe that the system has its merits. I do believe there's value in it, but I do believe there's room to improve it. I mean, I think we have 70 or 80 judges on the ballot coming up here this election, and I'll give you a nickel for anyone who can say they know who all those judges are. So I think just not unlike the legislature, where folks have want to take a peek, and you looked at my bio before we got together here today. I think it's important that folks can take a better look at these folks. So I believe that improves the merit system process, just like I think it improves the process to have more people sent to the governor.
So what you're saying is that the Proposition 115 would provide more information about judges?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot more disclosure. You get to see a lot more of what their hearings are about and get that out to the public rather than folks looking at this ongoing list and go, yes, no. I mean, you don't really get a lot of no recommendations. You know, you come down here to the legislature, we have 60 people elected by 200,000 people in each district every year. You're going to get vetted. You know, you go in this selection process, you have 80. Or however many there are, and there's not a whole lot of information. I mean, most people would not know even if they had a judge who lived next door to them if they're on the ballot.
Your argument, written argument in the State Voter Guide says, quote, competition produces excellence. And would you say competition or competence is the better quality for a judge?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Of course, we want, the more competent judges we can possibly get. The governor in these last 3 selections of the Supreme Court got to pick out of 5 people, which means they kept returning the same on. And for 40 years, I think they've only sent more than 3 times, or I think that's the most they sent. And I think that's an issue of incompetence, that more should be going to the governor. There should be a bigger selection.
Now, the other side of that political argument that you just made is from those who say that this is a political power play by the legislature to gain more control over the judiciary. How do you respond to that?
Well, well, like I just mentioned, it was a bipartisan move here. I don't know that too many people would say that the Arizona Bar Association is a Republican organization. I think most people would say, hey, that kind of leans a little to the left anyway. So I throw that out. I mean, if I were to tell you that all we had were Republicans pushing this forward, I guess that might be a good argument. But you have Democrats voting on this and think it's worthy to send to the voters. It's the transparency piece. It was well negotiated, and you're not going to threaten the bar. And you're not gonna, I know I had heard one interview. They felt threatened. That's not the case at all. I mean, we could easily go send other things and could have for years to the voters on merit selection. But by and large, Republicans see that there's a value in the merit selection process, and this is across the board appears to be helpful. So I think what you have is a smaller group trying to maintain their own power over this, and that's the political piece I think that we're missing in that conversation.
A spokesman for the governor, among others, called this a compromise when it came out of the legislature. Yeah. Was it a compromise?
I think it was, because you didn't have all the Democrats on board, but you had a good majority of them. And I thought, yeah, that kind of brought us all together on it. You know, everybody got to sit down at the table. And, you know, of course, that's what the public wants to see. They want to see us having this conversation, trying to work through the issues. And when you have the Chief Justice there, you know, winking a nod, but she's all in. I mean, she even wrote in favor of this. And so I think you could say that it's a non-compromise if you're keeping people off the table.
Now, I understand that compromise that we made reference to wasn't just between Democrats and Republicans in the legislature, but also involved the legal community and the Judges Association, yes, et cetera, who want to keep the system the way it is. And on the other side of it, there were legislators who wanted to really emasculate it, if you will, and go back to more elected judges. Is that the case?
Well, there are folks who like the elected system. I just mentioned I do. You know, you come up to Yavapai County, and we get to see our judges all the time. They're out there gathering signatures, or you know, and it's cumbersome for sure. But we're not as large as Maricopa or Pima County. But we get to elect our judges, and you know, clearly that system has worked very well for Yavapai County, and clearly this merit system has its merits down in Maricopa and certainly in Pima County.
One of the aspects of it that would be added to it by Prop 115 is that a judge or a justice up for retention could be called before a legislative committee to testify about his or her rulings and actions as a judge. Yeah. Do you think that could intimidate a judge or a justice and make him think twice about how he rules on something if he's subject to a political review?
Well, I think that maybe it will have them think twice, that there are ramifications. I mean, you can't – I know it says that everyone's supposed to be recommended to go back and be voted yes. I don't think anyone really in Arizona believes that every one of these judges is a perfect judge. There's got to be issues that we hear about them all the time. This happened, we didn't agree, and I think that's a great forum for the public to be able to see those decisions and to see the decision makers. I think the public wants to be more involved in the judicial process and trying to understand how they reach their conclusions.
If you had your way, what kind of a system would we have in place statewide for selecting judges?
Well, I think it's with Prop 115. I mean, that's how I see my way, where we can make sure we're keeping more judges on there who are good judges, that the public gets to see more about who they are, and that an elected governor has more choices to make. That makes me feel much better about looking into a merit system. And I do like the voting for judges. I know every one of them up there. They come to events. I can't say the same down here. I don't live down, but I did. I can't remember seeing so many judges. But you come up to Yavapai County, you'll see them. And they'll talk to you about the issues of the day and all that, and they're very competent. So I think this is well supported by a lot of those judges. Say, hey, that's some common sense changes. It's no power grab. I mean, I'm only here for a term limit. We're out of here in 8 years. I mean, this isn't a power grab for folks. This is a consensus-built initiative that has great merit to add and make a system much, much better.
For the opposition viewpoint, here's Tucson lawyer JoJene Mills, who chairs the No on 115 committee. JoJene Mills, chair of the No on Prop 115 committee. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you.
Why do you oppose Proposition 115?
The biggest reason I oppose it is the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We have a merit selection system for our judges in the state that has been respected around the nation. Probably the most definitive evidence of that is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce report from 2009 from their Institute of Legal Reform. And I read this to people because I think it's so important. Arizona leads the nation with the procedure it's put in place to fulfill the promise of true nonpartisan merit selection. If the U.S. Chamber of Commerce thinks we have a great system that they use as best practices examples for the rest of the nation, why are we fixing it? We're fixing it because a small group of politicians wants to take control of how we select judges in this state, and that's very dangerous.
You used the word dangerous, and you used that word in the written statement that's in the state election guide as well. What specifically is dangerous about this from your perspective?
One of the most basic parts of the American Constitution and the Arizona Constitution is the separation of powers between the branches of government. We have a very good system of checks and balances. An independent judiciary, in other words, our courts, being able to function independent of the other branches of government. Well, our government doesn't work without that. If judges are going to be intimidated and believe that their decisions are going to be reviewed and they'll actually even be picked without regard to merit, but because of politics, we lose that separation of powers. We lose the independence of our courts. And without independent courts to review acts of government, but also for people to go there and just have their disputes resolved in a fair way on a level playing field. People lose confidence in that system. Our whole government really comes into question.
You mentioned also the provision in the Prop 115 that would allow legislative review of judges coming up for retention. Specifically, how does that violate the separation of powers? It seems evident, but talk about it from a legal point of view.
No, a lot of people have asked that question, and I think it is really important. When a judge makes a decision, the decision is reviewed by our system of appellate courts. So if a trial judge here in Tucson makes a decision in a case, a sentencing, or throws a case out or whatever, that decision gets reviewed by the Court of Appeals and then the Arizona Supreme Court if they choose to review it. That is how judges' decisions are reviewed. Judges' conduct is reviewed through a Judicial Conduct Commission. So the Arizona Town Hall looked at Arizona government 2 years ago, reviewed everything in government, and said that judges are among the most accountable members of our government officials. If we do this, where now the legislative branch can essentially review decisions by holding hearings on retention of judges, now all of a sudden we have a different branch of government reviewing their work, and the wall, that separation of powers, gets eliminated.
But there's no authority behind that if the legislature or legislators are unhappy with a judge in that review process. That simply becomes public knowledge because it's a public hearing. What happens after that? Just it changes public perception, perhaps?
There's two things that I see that make that, and I will use the word dangerous. The first is that this is information for people in their decision-making. On our ballot right now are a number of judges up for retention. There's a big system called the Judicial Performance Review that's available for people to look at, where every person who comes to court and the lawyers and everybody else involved survey the judges, then it's compiled and reviewed with the judges. That information's available. So if now we're going to have political hearings, first of all, then the voters are going to be faced with made-for-TV hearings. And the system, I'm afraid, will be just cast into the same ill repute as we see members of Congress have, and unfortunately the executive branch. But more than that, the intimidation effect on judges, will good people even apply if they know they have to go through that? And then when they have to make very tough decisions, which all judges do, and they've got to worry about whether they're going to have to answer to politicians on TV, it makes me worry about the integrity of the whole system.
A lot of lawyers have spoken out against this.
Absolutely.
Including yourself, of course. And the state bar is being kind of waffly about where it is in regard to this, calling it a compromise. What was the compromise, and was that a good or a bad thing?
Well, you know, the Arizona Judges Association and the State Bar of Arizona entered into this, quote, compromise. The lobbyist for the Arizona Judges Association, Pete Dunn, who I have great respect for, didn't call it a compromise. He called it an extortion. Because what was happening was, with a supermajority in the Arizona legislature, they were going to pass whatever they wanted. So the politicians were saying, if you don't agree to this, then we're going to go back to election of judges. Or we're going to force you to come every time up you're up for retention. We're going to make every judge come to the legislature. They also were talking about budgets and pensions. So the State Bar and the Judges Association felt that they had to make this compromise at gunpoint. I disagree with that decision. I think they hope, frankly, that the community would rise up and say this is wrong. But there's nothing that would prevent future legislatures from doing whatever they wanted, even in the face of this compromise with this legislature. I understand the decision that the judges made and the State Bar made. I've been in those tough political positions, but it doesn't mean it's a good idea. And not only, one option would be to go back to electing judges. A nightmare. We can look at other states and see how bad that looks. $2 million, $4 million, $6 million for a seat on the Texas Supreme Court. But what this does is, it doesn't even give it to elections. It gives all the power to the governor. And no matter which party you feel affiliated with, we have a Republican governor now, but before that we had a Democratic governor. We just don't need to break down that wall of separation. And we need to continue to focus on the merit of judges, which is what the lawyers do who participated in the process.
Longer versions of both of these interviews are available at azweek.com. Also on the fall election ballot are 3 proposed constitutional amendments affecting management of Arizona public lands. In 2 separate interviews, I asked policy analyst E.J. Perkins of the Morrison Institute for Public Policy to review Propositions 118, 119, and 120. We'll start with Prop 118, which would change payouts from the State Trust Land Fund. Proposition 118, very complex, involving the State Land Trust and how the money out of it is distributed. What's the basic change in the formula that we should look for in this proposed constitutional amendment?
Well, basically, it would provide a 2%, 2.5% of the fund's average market value over the last 5 years. That's basically what the change would be to the formula.
And the idea there would be to smooth out the payout so that there's some payout in some consistent manner each year as opposed to huge fluctuations. Is that right?
That's correct. In the past, or currently, they were using the current formula. It's entirely possible that there are years where there is no payout or very little payout at all. And that's been the case for, looking historically, that's been the case for the last 10 years. And that's not in dispute. What this proposition will do is to smooth that out, guarantee an annual payout, but at smaller distributions.
Now let's talk a little bit about what this fund is. It's based in history. Before Arizona even became a state, it was allocated about 11 million acres by the federal government to be held in trust. The proceeds from sales or royalties from the use of those lands went into this trust fund, which is now about $3.5 billion, correct?
That's correct.
And then the payouts from this go primarily to K-12 education in Arizona.
That's correct, yes.
What Proposition 118 would do then would be smooth it out so there aren't those great lows or those great highs. But what would that mean for public education as far as funding goes?
Potentially, it could mean lower payouts to public institutions like education. That's the main worry of opponents to the proposition.
And why is that? Because the average would be done on the 2.5% basis?
Yes, just the way they do the calculation, it would just even out that way, and it would be less.
Now, the analysis you did talked a little bit about the formula that was used to determine how they would balance that payout, and there may be some issues with that analysis going forward in how they averaged it out. Talk about that.
Well, one concern has to do with a lot of this projection was based on a 19-year fiscal projection into the future. That's a long time, and most economists will always say you want to take that with a grain of salt. It's virtually impossible to predict the future that far in advance with a great deal of certainty. That doesn't mean that it won't happen as projected, but it certainly it's open to question whether that scenario will bear itself out.
Now, A couple years ago, K-12 education in Arizona got $0 from the fund because of the current formula and what the payout was, again, at the depths of the recession. Under the formula that is proposed in Proposition 118, there would be a guaranteed payout every year. Is that a good thing?
The advocates say, yes, that is a good thing. They'd rather settle for less funds, but funds nevertheless. And so they would certainly argue that, yes, that's a good thing.
What is the essence of Proposition 119?
In essence, the Prop 119 will amend the Arizona Constitution to allow the state to exchange state trust lands for other public lands for the purpose of protecting, if it's related to military facilities, or for the purpose of developing public land for sale or public use.
And who are its proponents?
Basically, you have an alignment between business interests, primarily those in the defense industry, and environmentalists. It's a weird sort of thing this time around. Their interests both line up almost perfectly on the issue.
And in fact, the vote to put it on the ballot was unanimous in the state house, as you pointed out in the analysis you wrote. But 11 Republican senators voted against it. Why was that?
Their concerns stem from concerns about state sovereignty. It's more about they worry about the further encroachment, in their view, about the federal government over Arizona public lands.
And are there any other arguments against Proposition 119?
That's the principal one against it. They're just concerned that this is one more instance where the federal government may be overreaching in terms of dictating controls on the state of Arizona. But also there are arguments that this may be giving environmentalists an unfair advantage in terms of giving them the capability to potentially shut down a military base simply over what they might view as a minor environmental concern.
Now, Arizonans have rejected a half dozen similar measures in the last several elections. What makes a difference with this one, and does it have a better chance?
Well, in the past, Arizonans have always been concerned about, are we giving land developers an unfair advantage in these types of deals? And the answer has been basically yes. They felt that that's been the case in the past. This time around, however, this is very cleanly worded. You've got proponents in business and on the environment, including the Sierra Club, for example. Businesses like it because it safeguards contracts, which in turn could potentially reduce the risk of job loss. That's a big issue these days. Environmentalists like it because it provides safeguards against over-commercialization of at-risk lands that may be adjacent to military facilities. So the answer is yes. I think chances are greater this year that the public may like this if they understand the details of what the proposition has in mind.
Proposition 120 is called the State Sovereignty Act. What would it do?
Basically, it would it would amend the Constitution to give Arizona the exclusive rights over its land and resources inside the state borders.
That means including land that is now controlled by the federal government?
Yes.
But there are some exceptions to that federal land.
There are indeed. It does not apply to Indian reservations. It does not apply to current U.S. lands related to military installation, U.S. forts, and things like that.
Who are the proponents of this, and why are they pushing it?
Well, the proponents believe their concern stems from a states' rights issue. They believe that Arizona is better suited, is better positioned to manage and better exploit the lands within its borders. They think that the current situation puts the state into an unfair situation relative to other states historically. In their arguments, you will often hear something referred to as, quote, equal footing. And that refers to the proponents' belief that Arizona was not giving that equal footing when these laws were first devised in the first place.
And then who are the opponents of it, and why do they oppose it?
The opponents are principally coming from the standpoint of it's a constitutional issue, that this would be immediately challenged in state because they under what's called the Supremacy Clause from the U.S. Constitution, giving the power of the federal government to make these kinds of determinations based on congressional mandates.
Now, the analysis you wrote concludes that if Proposition 120 passes, it will most likely be challenged by the federal government. Would you explain that?
Yeah, it's most scholars that I talk to say it's virtually guaranteed. There is precedent for this already on the books. There was a Supreme Court case a number of years ago that sort of specifically dealt with this issue, and the court came down on the side of the federal government in terms of declaring that the Supremacy Clause is indeed the supreme law of the land, and that a state cannot opt out of that for the reasons that's outlined in the proposition.
And any notion of what chance this has of passage?
This one's hard to say. There's a great deal of history behind it, much of it fascinating, but it may turn on how much the voter understands the background of this thing and how it came about, and what's fair and not fair to the state of Arizona from that standpoint. So it's going to depend on a number of factors. Hopefully, readers or voters will read up on the proposition to get a better understanding of what this thing is about.
E.J. Perkins, policy analyst with the Morrison Institute for Public Policy. Thanks for speaking with me.
My pleasure.
These interviews and more information on all the propositions are on the Your Vote 2012 section of our website, azpm.org. There you'll also find a vast store of information on the campaign, candidates, and issues, all designed to help you decide how to vote. That's our program for Friday, October 26, 2012. Next Friday, our update on campaign finance. For Arizona Week, I'm Michael Chihai.
Production of Arizona Week is made possible in parts by a grant from the Stonewall Foundation and by the members of Arizona Public Media. Thank you for your continued support.